Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to creators about their journeys, and we are so happy to have with us Kacey Ezell today. Kacey has had several anthology stories and has written several of her own books. More recently, her book, Magelight, has been released on audio, and we know that because we have really enjoyed listening to it, finishing
Woo!
it up.
I'm
So
so
we
glad.
are super excited to have Kacey with us today. Kacey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I'm so excited to be here. You guys are so awesome. It's so fun to talk to you. So,
Well, we appreciate that, and we are certainly glad that you could take time out of your obviously very busy schedule uh, to grace us with your presence, as they say.
oh, you're very kind. You're very kind.
Well, I got to butter up the guest.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us how you reached the decision to start writing and when did that happen?
So that's an interesting question. Toni Weisskopf, the publisher of Baen Books, she has a saying where she says writers write because they can't help it, and that's really kind of the case with me, right? So when I was a little kid, I was always making up stories. We would play pretend, and I was a bossy little kid, right? Very, very type A, very, little Aries girl. But I would I was constantly like recruiting my little friends to play out these pretend scenarios that I'd come up with in my head, and and when I was in school, sometimes I would write these things down and just keep them, show them to my mom, and my mom, of course, was very supportive and encouraging, and so like I always wrote stories, I always told stories. When I was 7, my mom, the other thing about me is that, like a lot of, creative type A, uh, you know, bossy little girls, I read very early, and uh, um, and so I was constantly hounding my mom for more books. And when I was about 7 years old, she introduced me to Anne McCaffrey's. It was actually the Harper Hall trilogy, and it was actually book 3 in the trilogy was the first one she gave me because that was the one that she had on hand.
Okay.
So my first Pern story was Dragon Drums by Anne McCaffrey, and I was just fascinated by this world of dragons and fire lizards and all that. And I so desperately wanted to be a dragon rider that I became a pilot, but that's a totally different story. Um, but when I guess I was in college. I graduated from college in 1999. I'll proudly date myself. And so in the late 90s, about my junior or sophomore year, I discovered the world of online Pern fan fiction. And so here was an opportunity for me to live out this dream of, being a dragon writer, create my own character. And so I got into writing stories in the Pern fan fiction world. Um, and uh that I just did it for fun. Like, it's fan fiction, so obviously I wasn't trying to publish it or anything like that. But looking back, I realized that that was really a very much a formative experience for me as a writer, because that's where I learned about character. That's where I learned about plot. That's where I learned about the basics of story structure and interactions and how to create emotionally impactful moments with your writing. Um, and it was fun, and I did it for years. I met my best friend doing it, um, and so you know in part because of those experiences, when it came time for me to pursue an advanced degree because the Air Force said that I should, I knew enough about myself to know that I wasn't going to do anything that wasn't fun for me. So I chose I chose to get a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing with a poetry emphasis because it's easier to write a poem than it is a novel. I kid you not. That was literally my logic, and for me anyway.
Uh-huh.
I found it easier, to write a poem than to develop a full novel. And of course, I was doing all this while I was active duty. I was flying helicopters, and such. And around this same time, because I too am a big geek, a big nerd. I have been going to Dragon Con for many, many years, and I went to Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia. I think it was 2004, and that's where I met John Ringo, who um, was, fascinated with me because I was um, super cute, mid 20s, cute little girl wearing, not little girl, but cute young woman wearing, dressed up for Dragon Con. But I was also a helicopter pilot, and he had helicopters in his books. And so we became friends and stayed in touch, and to the point where when I was deployed, I deployed to Iraq as an air advisor from 2009 to 2010. And during that time when I was deployed, I got an email from John saying, "Hey, I just took over a project. I'm editing a collection of military science fiction stories written by military veterans, and I would love to include some new voices. Do you have anything?" And I said, no, but I could. and and 24 hours later, I sent him the first draft of what became my first pro sale, which was the story Light in the Citizens Anthology,
Wait,
edited by John Ringo
oh,
and Brian Thompson.
wait,
Yep.
24 hours later, you already had a draft to sell?
hmm
Oh my gosh.
hmm Yeah.
That's
Um,
incredible.
Now, I have not since written a story that quickly. I think there were a lot of things in play there. One of them was that, I'd been sort of sitting on this creativity, and so it was like all there and ready to go. And the other thing was I was deployed, and when you're deployed, there's not a lot to do. You fly, you eat, you work out, and you hang out. Well, instead of hanging out one night, I just wrote a story. So
It sounds like my brother's experience in the Navy.
yeah,
He worked, he played Dungeons and Dragons, and he worked out, and those are the
yeah.
things he did.
Yeah, that's about what you do, about what we did when we were deployed. We also, like, we did, part of my job too was like, because I was an air advisor, part of my job was to create relationships and basically be friends with the Iraqi Air Force officers. So, we had a lot of, like, we would have to go and have chai with them and hang out and do social things. But that night I didn't have to, so I stayed in my room and wrote a story on my laptop. So, yeah.
Well, Kacey, it sounds like fiction has always been important to you, but did you have any other fan loves when you were coming along? Or was it just fiction?
Uh, any other fan loves, like other properties that I was obsessed with, but like Pern?
No, I'm talking about other types of fandom, like videos,
Oh,
movies, things like
oh,
that.
yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. So, fun fact, I was born in 1977. Like I said, I'm going to date myself. I was born in 1977, which was an amazing year in movies because Star Wars came out for the first time. And I saw it in the theater as an infant. So that is one of my claims to fame. And I mean, I don't remember much about that experience, but I was definitely there. And Superman with um, Christopher Reeves came
Christopher
out.
Reeves, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so growing up, I was always a big fan of both of those movie franchises. Um, and I loved watching them. I never really got into the comics. I'm not really sure why. It just, I think it was just a matter of proximity, right? Neither of my parents were read comics, so, but my mom was a huge reader, so I read a lot of books because she had them. And then my dad liked movies, so I would watch movies with my dad. So I loved Superman. I loved the Star Wars franchise. Desperately loved that one. Had a bunch of the toys and everything. So would do the little Princess Leia buns as a little kid. And let's see what else. As I got a little bit older, I got really into both like spy thrillers and like detective fiction. So detective fiction was I mostly read, but that was when I first fell in love with Raymond Chandler's work. So like The Big Sleep and Farewell My Lovely. And then I kind of went on a noir kick where I watched a bunch of noir movies. Like Chinatown and LA Confidential and Mulholland Falls, like just really sort of like doing a deep dive into that subgenre. That was when I was a little bit older. Kind of the same thing with like the spy fiction. love Robert Ludlum. And really, and John Le Carre. Again, those are both fiction, but they've both had movie adaptations done, and so
Hmm.
I really enjoy watching those. And of course, James Bond. I mean, who doesn't love James Bond, right? So yeah.
Just as an additional type of fandom, did you have any? Was there anime when you were young? Did you have access to anime when you were young?
A little bit. My parents were also active duty Air Force, and so when I was 9, we moved to the Philippines, and that was the first place that I experienced anime. Was renting VHS videos overseas in the Philippines. I never got into any of the like. I may have seen them, but I didn't know at the time, so I don't know if I watched them. But this was like in the 80s,
Yeah.
right? The late 80s. So,
Right.
so I remember watching a lot of animated movies that we would rent and thinking, oh, this is a very cool animation style, very cool art style. It's very different than American animation. And I just didn't know at the time that it was a whole thing. I just knew it was
Hmm.
the Japanese animation style.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have not. I think I would very much like to get into anime. I just have not done so. So, and now of course a lot of my like consumption time is converted into creation time.
Right.
So,
Sure. Sure.
but I
Uh,
do. I will say this. I do try to make a point of doing what I call creative rest. Right. So it's like power lifters when they go and they work out all the time. Well, they have to take rest days, otherwise, they they don't see the same
yeah.
benefits, right? And
Yeah.
so on those rest days, they'll do something else. A lot of times it's like yoga, right? I feel like my creative brain works the same way. I can create and create and create, and it's great and it feeds me, but at the same time, it takes a lot of energy. And so, one of the sort of creative self care things that I have been doing over the last couple of years is intentionally consuming stories in ways that don't feel like they take as much energy as writing stories do. And it's mostly not through reading. Honestly, it's mostly through video gaming.
Hmm.
I love playing video game RPGs, and I love playing tabletop RPGs, and they both sort of give me that creative charge that allows me to, but it works a different part of my brain, so it doesn't it recharges my energy, refills that creative well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a digression, but
Yeah. No. 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 That's perfectly fine. Since your mother kind of got you um into the fantasy to start with,
Mhm.
um, did, when you were in school, when you were growing up, did any of the other kids look at you like you were strange or anything like that, or did you know?
Absolutely.
Boy,
Oh,
she said that quick,
absolutely.
didn't she?
I can remember I was so I remember going to like a gifted and talented English class one time, and I brought with me a book of Shakespeare. And to be fair, we were reading Shakespeare at the time, but this wasn't the like book we had been assigned. This was, one that I had at home. And I brought it because it was mine and I could mark in it.
Mhm.
And I got so much crap for bringing like they're like, who reads Shakespeare? And I kept thinking like, Brat, we're all reading Shakespeare. Why are you making fun of me just because I have my own book, So, but yeah, I
Oh,
remember one girl. She was actually really talented. She drew this like caricature of me when like the classic nerd pose with like my tooth blacked out
ah,
and the glasses. I did not wear glasses at the time either. To
ah,
be fair, I started wearing glasses in my 40s, but she drew like a nerd caricature,
ah.
and it was, in fairness, it was really well done. Like she did a good job. But I was like, wow, that's really mean. I
Yeah.
had some mental choice words for her that I won't say because this is a all ages podcast.
Thank you for that. I think
You
we
got
could
it. You got
probably
it.
kind of get an idea
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
So, but yeah, no, of course, and like a lot of creative people, like I think a little bit differently than the norm,
Yeah.
and so sure, um, I was the kind of kid who um, I often I would do a couple things. Eventually, I learned to kind of like dial it back a little bit, make myself a little bit smaller, um, be a little bit less overt about my creative activities, and the ways in which I thought, to try and blend in. And a lot of that too is just sort of survival mechanism from being a military brat, because we moved every 3 years, so every 3 years I would sort of reinvent myself, and I would think about the things that had made people you know uh, that had either caused people to tease me, or not want to befriend me, and I would like not do those things at the next place. And so I got really good at masking, and sort of um, impersonating a mundane or a normie,
Mm.
if you will.
A mundane. Where have we heard that term before?
A muggle.
A muggle.
A muggle.
Yeah.
Uh,
A muggle. There
Um,
you go.
but those were useful experiences, right?
Sure.
To learning how to deal with a larger society.
Casey, the thing we do that's a little different about our show is we like to approach creators, no matter what their background is, from the point of view of how their fandom drives what they do and what they love and how they
Mhm.
create. Can you tell us a little bit about how your fandom influences your writing?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, So the thing about my writing is that I am all over the place. I jokingly call myself genre fluid, but it's really actually a pretty apt description, because I got started writing, military sci-fi, or military paranormal fiction, and my first trilogy was like an a military focused sort of secret history or alternate history, with a little bit of fantasy elements in there. I did a bunch with the military sci-fi universe, the Four Horsemen universe. I'm one of the core authors there, and now I've branched into fantasy, and not just fantasy, but fantasy with a real strong romantic subplot. So what that has ended up doing is that my initial fan base. A lot of them tended to be the classic military science fiction fan, right? So they're, mostly men, mostly older than 40. A lot of them have a military background. A lot of those guys are not really probably going to be interested in reading Magelight, unless I can get them interested enough in me to like the way that I write, to where they'll try anything that I've written, and maybe it's not for them, but they appreciate it because they appreciate my storytelling style, and the themes that I explore in my writing. um, so that's kind of been my goal, is with every story that I tell, is to make it something that is going to have enough of me in it, that it's going to resonate with the the members of my fan base who identify with those things, right? And I'll give you an example. I've characterized Magelight. So Magelight is a fantasy adventure, and I said it has a real strong romantic subplot. Well, that subplot is actually what some part of it. It's a reverse harem subplot,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it even more complicated, right? Which what that means is that there are three male love interests and one female, and she's not going to choose between them. She gets to keep them all. Um, that is a subgenre that the fandom for which is almost exclusively women, because that's not a thing that most guys find compelling, right? And that's fine. And I would love to reach out to those ladies and be like, "Hey, girls, come read my book. It's really good." Um, but my existing fan base is, as I've said, mostly men. So one of the things that I specifically tried to do with this book, understanding that not everybody's going to love it, and that's fine, they don't have to, but I specifically worked really hard on making each of the male characters like competent, believable, fully fleshed out men that showed that showed how much I respect men in general.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? I tried very much not to make them simps, I guess. If I could borrow the Gen Z word, I guess. I tried very much not to make them, female caricatures or female fantasies of what men are, but like real dudes. And to the point where I actually recruited some of my male writer friends to read it specifically with that in mind. Nick Severson was one of them, and he gave me incredible feedback about how to make them read like actual action hero men, and not some chick's fantasy of what three dudes would be like. So
Talking about having your style bring people in,
Hmm.
neither Janet nor I have ever played a collectible card game,
Hmm.
but Shadow Card Guardian brought us into the world, and we're waiting for another one of those books to show up on
It's
Audible.
coming.
Oh,
Yeah, it
good.
is coming. Yeah, it's I yes, yeah. So Shadow Card Guardian was a fun thing, and it's a great illustration of what I talk about when I say I'm genre fluid, right? So Shadow Card Guardian was my first foray into lit RPG, and I was very, very fortunate to make friends with John and Shammy Stovall. John Stovall has this incredible series called Demon Card Enforcer that lays out it lays out the system for this world. That's like, how the cards, how the magic is based in the cards and what they do, and all the stats and everything. And I read it and I loved it and I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I reached out to John and I was like, hey man, if you ever want, like, a special guest author to write a dungeon or something for you in this, like, hit me up. And he he was very cute. He was like, do you want to write a book in my world? And I was like, yes, please. That would be amazing. Thank you so much. So he worked with me while I wrote Shadow Card Guardian as a spin-off of his series. And it was so much fun. I wrote it so quickly because I was just so into it. And he's just a great person to work with. But I had never written lit RPG before, so he was there to kind of guide me and explain to me, okay, this is what the audience is going to expect. These are the tropes that they're going to want to see. These are, this is what you can't mess with. This is what you can mess with. One of those things, honestly, being the sex of the main character. Most lit RPGs end up having a male main character. Not all of them, and a lot of the really big ones do have a female main character, but most of them do have a male main character. He explained, and I expressed, I asked him, I was like, should I steer away from that, because it looks like it's sort of a genre convention, that it's like like a dude, and he gets into this system and he goes and he builds his power and kicks butt all over the place. And John explained to me, he was like, no, 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 you can and you probably should write a female, because I think you can do it in a way that is really going to draw in a lot of the traditional lit RPG audience. You just have to make sure that she's uber competent and comfortable with violence. And I was like, oh, well, I can do that. So that's how Danny was born. And we had so much fun, doing that together. And I'm about halfway done with Shadow Card Guardian 2. I cannot wait to get back to it. I have to finish working on my contribution to the next Romanov book first, and then it'll be back to Shadow Card Guardian 2, and it'll be going up on my website as I write each chapter. So yeah.
You stole my question.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, no. I was just gonna say, well, it wasn't really a question, but it was, tell us what you're working on. What's next?
So again, genre fluid, all over the place, cannot pick a lane, ADHD. I mean, pick your label here. Currently I'm working on my scenes that I have been uh, that I've been designated to write for the third book in the Romanov Reign series that I'm co-writing with Tom Kratman and Justin Watson. This is an alternate history series that poses the question: what would the world look like if some of the Romanov children had been successfully rescued from the Bolsheviks
Oh,
and survived to unite the anti-Bolshevik forces in the Russian Civil War? And it's written by 3 military veterans, so there's a heavy, heavy military focus.
yeah.
So for all of my dudes that I love so much, that are like, Kacey, stop writing the girly fantasy stuff and get back to the war. There you go, sir. I'm working on
Give them what you
it.
want. Give them what they
That's
want,
right.
Casey. Give them what
That's
they
right.
want.
That's right. Uh, but the yeah, the second book, 1919 Romanov Rising, it was a Dragon Award finalist this past year, and so we were very excited about that, and I'm very excited to follow it up with this third one. The title's still in development. It's going to have something to do with Romanov, I'm sure. That's sort of our convention. But yeah, it's great fun working with Tom and Justin. They're both super great professionals, so meticulous in their research, and we have a pretty good time. So I'm working on that, and then after that, I'm going to finish up Shadow Card Guardian 2 by the end of the year. As soon as I have the whole thing finished, I'll start posting it again on Royal Road. But my direct supporters through my website will get early access to those chapters as I write them. And then in early 2026, I might take January off just for you know again self-care reasons.
Hmm.
But at the latest by 1 February, I'm going to start writing book 3 in the Magelight series. So that's the plan.
Very cool.
Kacey, one of the things we do with our podcast is we explore people's process so that other creators can learn from the experience of our guest. So, if you
Mhm.
could you walk us through your creative process from conception to completion, or in your case, publication, or if it goes past
Yeah.
publication into marketing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's interesting about this is that it is different per project for me. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Overall, I characterize myself as a plotter, which means that I work out my outline before I
Hmm.
sit down and actually start drafting the work. Um, with Magelight, and then following Magelight with Blood on the Sand, which is book 2 in the Magelight series that I just turned in August. Um, the the process that I follow, I actually realized that I outlined more than once. I wrote, like, I plotted out using a series of story beats, kind of figuring out what that is, and then that becomes outline version 1, and then outline version 2, I revisit it months later, and and kind of refine everything and make sure that, because I like to use twists, and I like to use the mechanisms of Chekhov's gun, where you have hang the gun on the wall in the first act so that it gets
Hmm.
fired by the third act. I In between outline version 1 and outline version 2 is where a lot of those things really get sort of worked out, and I make sure that I have the correct foreshadowing hints early on in the text before the payoff, near the end of the text. Um, and then after that, I end up with outline version 3, which is where I actually physically copy it into my Scrivener file, scene by scene by scene, so that I then have, I know when I open up to write a scene, I have like the notes of, okay, this is what needs to happen in this scene. Um, by doing that, I realized that it makes for a much tighter novel, and it makes for a lot less editing on the back end for me, which I vastly prefer, because the way my brain works, once the draft is done, I'm like, cool, I'm out. Can't think about it anymore. And so, which as a professional author is not the correct answer, right? Like, because it's got to go through several rounds of editing after that, in order to make sure that it's the best thing that it can be.
Yeah.
So, um, in even with this intense outlining process, it still has to go through those rounds of editing. So I try to make sure that those rounds of editing are as painless as possible. um, and that's kind of why I do that. Now, what's interesting about that is, so that's been my process for the fantasy project, for the Mage Light series. For the Romanov series, um, we also use an outline process because it's kind of necessary with 3 of us. And the way that we've done that is one person has sort of been kind of like lead chair on each of the novels. For 1919 Romanov Rising, it was me. So I was the driving force behind, okay, let's figure out what's going to happen. Let's get the outline together. And then, you go do these scenes, you go do these scenes, and I'll do these scenes. Um, and and I did that. Now, I will say I did not do nearly as good a job as Justin has done with book 3. So I'm really excited to see how book 3 turns out, because Justin put together this incredible, this is Justin Watson, my co-author. He put together this incredible like timeline and outline that specifically details, okay, Kacey, you do this scene, this scene, this scene, this scene. This is how it's going to interact with Tom's scenes. So it was all very good. Um, and that's different than what I did with Shadow Card Guardian, which was to wing it. I completely pants Shadow Card Guardian, despite the fact that I'm habitually a plotter. And I did it that way. I'm not really sure why. It just sort of happened. But it turned out really well. And I'm having to be a little bit more deliberate with Shadow Card Guardian 2. It's almost like Shadow Card Guardian was a story that was pretty fully formed in my head. It was just waiting to come forward. Shadow Card Guardian 2 is a little bit more nebulous. So I am having to be a little bit more deliberate about thinking ahead, and um but I still don't have like a full outline for it. I'm still just sort of flying by the seat of my pants, which is interesting. So um, um, but yeah, that's sort of how it goes up through drafting. And then with marketing is different for everything, because with marketing, what you're trying to do is you're trying to reach the audience who's going to love your book. Well, with my books, they're all over the place. So I
Mhm.
have to try and reach different audiences. And with each of those audiences, convince them that I'm amazing and that they should come be part of my community and read everything that I write. Um, and that's not going to work with everybody, obviously, but it is working with some people, and I'm so grateful for the audience members and fans that I've met who have trusted me to lead them to a totally different genre, something completely off the wall that they never otherwise would have picked up,
Yeah.
but that they've enjoyed, So
Well, uh, I think it's wonderful that you have been able to diversify, your genres, and like you said,
hmm
try to bring different readers into maybe exploring those other genres with you. So that's awesome.
thank you.
Well, um, we're getting ready to wrap up here. So one of the things we want our guests to tell our audiences, where can they find out more about you and your books?
Okay. So the best place to start with me is my website. It's www.kaceyezell.net or .com. Either one works. They both go to the same place. You can find a complete list of my novels there, and quite a few of the anthologies that I've got stories in are all listed there. In addition, that's the place to go to do what I call joining my horde, join my dragon's horde. So when I talk about joining my fan community, that's what it is. And you can do, people can do it for free. The base level is free, and I will basically, you get my newsletter every week, with announcements and just what's going on in my life, and we just keep in touch that way. And then I also have a Discord server that members of my community come and we can hang out over there and chat and stuff. And then, if for the super fans who want to support me directly, I do have additional paid tiers that get you access to my works in progress as I create them. One thing that I don't do is I don't promise, like, oh, you'll get a new chapter every week, because no,
Mm,
you won't. I'm so
well,
sorry.
that
I
makes
wish I could.
sense.
I wish I
That
could make
makes
that promise,
sense.
but
Sure.
I'm still a mom. I'm still homeschooling a kiddo. I'm still, uh,
Yeah,
and just life just happens. So
sure.
I'm so grateful for my super fans who have stuck with me, and no harm, no foul to those who come in and be like, she's not giving me anything in a couple weeks. I'm out. So,
uh,
but it is great to have those
yeah,
super fans, and I love them dearly.
we have so enjoyed talking with you.
It's been wonderful to talk to you guys.
We really appreciate you taking the time. It has been just a lot of fun, and um, we just wish you a continued success in
Thank
everything
you.
that you were doing.
And more Magelight.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes,
So, like
definitely.
I said, book two is in. It has been through edits. I have not have it come back from proofs yet, but it does have a date. It is April, I think. April of 26 is what I'm being told. So look for it then. It's called Blood on the Sand. And the cover, you guys, the cover is so beautiful. It's another Sam Kennedy cover, and it's just
Yeah,
fire.
cool,
Yeah.
cool.
And we want to thank our audience for joining us today while meeting Kacey Ezell. And thank you all for tuning in. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.